I am Vanessa. I am alumni of Coacharya, very close to obtaining my PCC, and I am excited to be hosting this exciting webinar today. Getting naked with your clothes on. Emphasis on with your clothes on. I've got Dr. Pat here, who is, gosh, I don't know where to begin, Dr. Pat. I'm not going to do it justice here. Founding member of the ICF, you're a master coach, board certified coach, member of the Forbes Coaching Council, founding member of Harvard University's Institute of Coaching, and an incredible person who is also one of our new trainers for Coacharya. So welcome. I'm so excited to visit with you, Dr. Pat.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, let me just step in, Pat, for a moment. The reason I'm interjecting in between is that Pat is an accredited trainer with us for our ACTP programs. And we reached out to him, I think about 6 months ago, and he was gracious enough to accept. He's one of the most senior master coaches in the world. I think probably he got it in one of the very, very early stages or inception of the MCC program itself. And he was president of ACTO, which is the trainers organization, and of course, Circle of Distinction and all that Nessa talked about. So we are truly privileged to have him here. Of course, we are truly privileged and honored to have him as a trainer for Coacharya. And I leave him to you. I just wanted to, so as an aside, when I got a message on my phone today about getting naked, I wasn't quite sure where the message was coming from. And as it so also happened, my wife asked me, oh, okay, so what is this program about? So I had to go to some lengths to explain to her what Pat is going to talk about today. Perhaps she's in the program somewhere, I'm not quite sure. Over to you, Pat.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. That was a kind of a truncated message without the whole title, but it probably created some interest, so I appreciate that. Let me go ahead and share my screen and say a little bit about, if I can, oh dear, where to go? Share screen, PowerPoint. There we are. Okay. So I've done this program in various forms for a couple organizations. I'm going to be doing it for the Harvard Institute of Coaching in July, talking about research points about this. But it's very, the story is interesting for this group, and the way I synchronistically met Ram and heard about Coacharya, I am so excited to be part of this organization because philosophically it just fits me to a T. Back in the 70s, I got my master's degree in humanistic psychology and actually got to train with Carl Rogers at that time down in Georgia, at University of West Georgia. And then later on, I got my doctorate in transpersonal psychology, all the consciousness raising, East-West philosophy, synthesis, and actually wrote a book on transpersonal psychology back then and had to put things on the shelf for a while because that kind of got out of vogue. It was like, let's get more practical, let's get more research-based, et cetera. But I've always held on to the importance of a client sharing their naked truth, of people having an opportunity with a counselor or a coach to get naked metaphorically. So I've used that phrase. It's actually the metaphor in my new program called Conscious Living Mastery. And that's the metaphor we use for having a space where you can have a committed listener, could be a good friend, could be a priest or a mentor, but we always know it can be a coach. And so coaching is that unique space where whole conversations take place. And it really is needed now today, I think more than ever. We already knew coaching was important, but in the world of racial crisis and COVID-19 and who knows what comes next, coaching is one of those professions that can really answer the call. So it is about going deeper with your clients, but not doing personal archaeology like a therapist might do. It's just that we embrace emotions in coaching, unlike the early days when there was kind of a false bifurcation in coaching, that if your client shared feelings or started getting emotional, you went, either coaches didn't know what to do with it, or they tried to fix it, or they would refer them to a therapist. And if somebody's already coming to coaching and you've decided they're coachable, emotions have a great place in helping them make whatever transformation they're looking to make. The object is that all emotions are good. Some just don't feel good. But once they're expressed, they shift. And I'll be talking a little bit about that. So contextually, I have a few slides I want to go through. There's a couple of exercises I might do quickly with a group. We won't do breakout sessions, but we'll ask some people to post chats, or maybe a few people can, oh, the screen now, what happened to my screen?
No, what happened to the screen? You had Coacharya's YouTube screen. It wasn't your PowerPoint. So you just have to bring your PowerPoint deck onto your desktop. Okay. And yeah, got it.
Sorry.
Got there.
Thank you. Thank you. A little technical fixing there. Thank you. So what we're going to do is do some general information. People can post things in the chat. My helpers here can see if there's something important. I'll try to save room at the end. I think people are planning on 60 minutes. I can stay later if we want to, but I'll try to save room for Q&A at the end. So for ICF's regard, and I know you also have EMCC and BCC and others, but let's just look at the core competencies and how they relate to this. When you're establishing the agreement with a client, you know, this is when you can start to go beneath the surface. An ACC coach will just say, oh, okay, that's what we'll work on. And a PCC and an MCC will go deeper. Tell me more about that. How will things be different if that occurs? Let's get a clear agreement on what can happen in the coaching relationship. And so coaching needs to be a safe place for what's maybe not been spoken about. We all know that coaching is about the unknown because we're comfortable with not knowing. We're asking questions that neither one of us know the answer to. We're exploring the future, actually, and not digging up the past. And why clients come to coaching after all? You know, they want increased awareness. They're wanting to make some change. I'll get into some more details about that. But if you think of this metaphor, some people use the iceberg theory that what's under the surface is, I don't like that, because what's under the surface is freezing cold. So I use the concept of snorkeling in the islands that, like the video behind me, you know, I don't live there. That's just a video of Maui. If you've ever been snorkeling, you can swim in the ocean and you can swim in the coves of the Caribbean. But once you snorkel, you see the beauty that's under the surface. And you might also see some danger, like sea anemones, and maybe a big fish will come up that might scare you. If you scuba dive, you can go even deeper. And I've been as deep as 110 feet in shipwrecks, et cetera. That's a little nerve-wracking, and always glad I was with a partner or a coach. We don't do that in coaching. We don't scuba dive. We just help them look under the surface, just under the surface. What's not being expressed, noticed, seen, to increase the client's awareness. And then if you think about Coacharya as an organization, why do learners come to training? Why are people coming to be coaches? Most of them are already natural helpers or confidants. They've been good listeners. Someone listened to their wants and desires, and so they said, well, heck, I want to be a coach. And that's how we have 44,000 ICF coaches or whatever it is today plus. But where do emotions fit in our training? The new competencies, and I'll say more about this, but they actually use the word emotions 9 times, both the emotions of the client, but also the emotions of the coach. For a coach to be aware of what's their emotional hook, or what do they bring to the moment that may prevent them from being totally present. And so I use the term compassionate curiosity as the best method for understanding uniquenesses, if that's a word. I make up words a lot, so that's done on purpose. And I think in today's quest for coaching to become embracing diversity and uniqueness and differences better, curiosity is the glue that will help. I can be non-judgmental and curious, and I've spoken on 6 continents. I can always say, if I say anything that's comes off as offensive or doesn't land well or is not understood, please know that's not my intention, and educate me. So there's curiosity goes a long way. It's a nice neutral term for wondering. And then the ones that come to training, when getting to know our students is part of the stand we take. What are some ways you can get to know more your colleagues at Coacharya or the clients you get? How can you really get to know them? Would you want them to write an essay about their life? I have people write a life story and they can do whatever they want. I've had 40 pages of butcher paper with a timeline on it, stories of different ages and stages. I've had poems, I've had narratives, I've had bullet points. It's an interesting way that all my clients share who they're bringing to the conversation. And I don't have to go into the past in depth. It's just kind of like a Cliff Notes version or a summary version. So why clients seek coaching? Well, obviously, new awareness and strategy and behaviors. They're not wanting transactional coaching. They're, in my belief, or we're not wanting to just profess transactional coaching. You want this, we'll do this, we'll have these goals and you'll get it. It's transformational coaching that we hope for. And that involves awareness. You could also insert the term consciousness there. So for being your best self in what I think are the 4 categories that really fit almost everything: health, wealth, love, and happiness. If you can think of a goal that doesn't fit in one of those 4, please let me know. But I think that's what people come to coaching for. And they often tie together, as we know. Now, Oscar Wilde made a great quote that I love. You might as well be yourself because everyone else is already taken. Now, those of us who are over, say, the age of 40, where Carl Jung said we're kind of in midlife, that's still somewhat true. We have kind of a spiritual quest. We've made it in work, maybe. We've raised our kids. We're looking for life purpose. We're looking for deeper meaning. We're still looking for who are we? We sometimes facetiously say, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet. And the funny thing is, if any of you coach youth or young people, they may not really know who they are. They're exploring who they are. So there's an interesting exercise I want to do. As the caterpillar said to Alice in Wonderland, who are you? I'm going to play a name game. I want all of you to think back to your early years. How was your name? First name, last name, whatever name comes to mind. How was your name attached to stories or experiences, good or bad, about who you were? And how has that changed today? Now, we're not set up to do breakouts, and I don't want to give 10 minutes to this, but I'll give you a quick example. My real name is Thomas Patrick Williams. So I go by my middle name, which has always been a challenge because on my passport, I'm Thomas. On my driver's license, I'm Thomas. On my taxes in the United States, I'm Thomas. But I'm not Thomas. I don't want to be Thomas. I'm named after Thomas Patrick McCormick, my great-grandfather, who was an Irish railroad man. And I like the name Patrick. And in the early days when I went by Pat, I would get, is Ms. Pat Williams here? Or is Patty Williams here? Or I would get teased and be called Patrashy or Patricia or something. And I don't have any big emotional hurts from that, but I have an identification with being Patrick. So I want each of you to think about some story from your early life about how was your name an effect in the stories that you have. And I'd love to hear people put some things in chat. I'm even okay if somebody wants to unmute themselves and just tell a quick little story about how that worked for you. So is there any comments that people have? If we can do it in chat, Nisa, you can look at it, or I can look at it, or Ram.
Yeah, we're looking at it, yeah. Leah Black said, Princess Leah, always. Of course.
Well, that's not so bad.
So you can see the chat.
I can, yeah. There's Mindy says Mork and Mindy TV show, yeah, with Robin Williams' first efforts.
Yeah, Komal says she didn't like her name because it was too difficult for anyone to pronounce it. Yeah.
Got my name from my grandmother, Helen of Troy. Oh, I love this. So the point of this exercise, and you can do this in more depth, you can even journal about it, is are there any emotions tied to the name that you were called? Or maybe for the women who got married and changed their name, what's it like to have a different last name? What's it like to like be somebody else? It's like a stage name almost of a famous person. Is that who you are, or is that who you were? Some people have picked a nickname and they become that. So this is a good way to kind of get to know your client a little bit. It's a fun story. It's pretty non-detached. You still want to receive? Yeah. So we'll probably have a recording of all these comments in chat. So that'll be good to take a look at. All right, let me go back to my share screen. Okay. Play current slide. So as I said in the new ICF competencies, you've got working with emotions, yours and the client, and the client's energy are highlighted at least 9 times. That's a big shift. I love the new competencies. I love the language of the new 8 instead of the 11 that we helped create 30 or 25 years ago, whatever it was. They worked for a long time, but I really love the new ones. And it also talks about the mindset of the coach, of course. So the time has come, I believe, which is the reason I'm doing this workshop and created my program, to embrace emotional learning as a key success factor. You know, it's funny, back in 75, 76, when I was getting my doctorate, Daniel Goleman was the first president of the Institute, or the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology, back in his hippie long hair days. And then when he created emotional intelligence, it's like, oh, all of a sudden, emotions are okay in the workplace. We can now talk about them because they're scientific. It's called emotional intelligence. Well, there's a lot to that. And in positive psychology today and in EQ work and EQ assessments, it's very important. But one thing I want to mention in this workshop is, what are we doing with that intelligence? We have a lot of intelligences, but sometimes we don't make them practical. So I think emotional learning is a key. And I'm not talking about emotional archaeology. We're not digging for big wounds or something, but they may come up. And I want to teach you how the self-disclosure of your client and the self-disclosure of you, the coach, can do something to normalize that. All humans have stories. Carol Dweck, who created the concept of growth mindset, I just love this quote. You know, love challenges. This is a command, not a statement. Love challenges. Be intrigued by mistakes and enjoy effort and keep on learning. That's the growth mindset. There's even talk today about post-traumatic growth syndrome. You know, as a psychologist, I work for a lot with soldiers and wreck victims and sex abuse survivors and post-traumatic stress. And when I got into coaching, I had a little bit of that. I do coaching now with Navy SEALs coming back from deployment, but they're not damaged. They're just looking for career change. But there's a lot of research today on post-traumatic growth, that positive psychology concept, resilience, you could also say. And that's a big part of having somebody to share your truth with, somebody where you feel safe, somewhere you feel embraced in that sacred space that we call coaching. Now, many of you probably use a wheel of life in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not everybody, but I've always seen this as something that's misused. It's not just a wheel, it's a conversation starter. So if you have your client give a relative score on each of these areas of their life, then you can get behind that to the meaning. If they put a 6 in health and a 7 in finances and a 10 in fun and recreation, what does that mean to them? And you can go deeper. And going deeper, one way to get to it, being a masterful coach, is to not settle for the superficial. One of the best masterful questions you can ask is, and what else? And then shut up and let the silence become a crucible for the client's thinking and depth. That question, if you just ask, what else? Is there anything else? And what else about that? That's amazing. So this is a way, if you use it, or if you just use it as a conversation, all areas of life are connected. So no matter where you start, it doesn't matter. But you want to really get to know under the surface, the snorkeling. What's under the client's first assessment, first response. Dr. Martin Luther King said this statement: "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." Truer words were never spoken today, and I think we're seeing some change happening, I hope, for the long term, not for the short term. And coaching conversations can be a big part of that. Emotions are powerful in coaching because it really is energy in motion. And that's not just a play on words. There's plenty of research today that shows where the brain lights up, what section of the brain control, the amygdala hijacking that might occur when you're frustrated and you respond right away, the prefrontal cortex and how that allows you to think clearly and come up with solutions. And there's much more depth to that, the neurology of coaching, which I know you've all either had a workshop on or you will. Research shows that attempting to minimize or ignore thoughts and emotions only serves to amplify them. So we may try to bury them in our shadow compartment, or we may try to ignore them, but eventually they will fester. If you want to use a term about illness, the infection, they will fester if they're ignored. And these are the commonly recognized emotions. There's many, you can have a whole chart, but anger, fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, surprise, and contempt. That's what the most science and emotions say. These are the basic categories. But happiness is in the center. So maybe is that the center we come back to balance ourselves, to get centered, as the word means in meditation or yoga or Tai Chi or whatever it might be. There's a quick story I'll share. Years ago, I went to a Cirque du Soleil performance in Denver, Colorado. I've been to many of them, and this was in a small circus tent, so it only held about 2,500 people. And they were on horseback, and they were flipping upside down and throwing objects and balancing balls and plates and being their crazy selves, if you've ever seen it. And at intermission, I went out and talked to one of the performers, who of course was selling t-shirts and objects. And I said, I got to tell you, I think about work-life balance all the time. And when I see you guys balancing, it's like, it made me think of, wow, how can I help myself and my clients achieve that kind of balance? And he said, well, obviously you weren't paying attention. Balance is only momentary. We're in a constant state of motion. So that hit me like a lead balloon. It was like, oh, that's it. We need to have a place of center. We're never, work-life balance is a myth. It's momentary. What are you paying attention to in the moment? What do you need to come back to? What do you need to express that will get you back to the place of center, which is happiness? So suppressing or expressing emotions eventually leads to what psychologists call emotional leakage. And it can come out in ways that surprise you, that actually are way too volatile for the situation at hand. And let me give you, well, and then I'll say this need for emotional flexibility. If you haven't read the book by Susan David called Emotional Agility, fabulous book. That term is being used around a lot. I know you guys are aware of Marsha Reynolds' book, Coach the Person, Not the Problem, because she just came out with that and she's spoken to your group. So there's a lot of research and writing out there today about emotions and the role they need to play. But let's look at this for a minute. Carl Jung, one of my heroes who never knew me, he's a mentor who was probably dead before I knew of, but I just loved his philosophy. I really eschewed Freud from an early age, embraced Maslow and Jung and Roberto Assagioli and Carl Rogers and others. This is a statement we all need to keep track of, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you might call it fate. Like, oh, that's just what I deserved, or that's just the way my life is. So as I said earlier, I alluded to this, if you have emotional intelligence, well, then what? I came up with a term called awareness intelligence. If you have the intelligence, what do you do with it? If we have good EQ, then it demands an intelligent expression of that awareness. But as I say in my book, Getting Naked, it's to the right place, right person, and right time. You don't go out and get naked any more than you would nude in the middle of the street. You don't do it everywhere. So that's why I use that evocative metaphor. is we have to be careful and in a safe place and with a trusted person. I don't know if any of you around the world have ever seen this game called Barrel of Monkeys. I actually have it on my desk, but it was a game I used in child psychology at a young age, and my kids loved it. Inside the barrel is all these plastic monkeys, and you try to see how many you can hook arm in arm and play a little game, who can get the most. But I also think analogously, that's what emotions are like that are unexpressed. Imagine if you have a conversation with your significant other or your friend or a family member, and they ask you to do something, and all of a sudden you blow up, and it's just way more expression that called for the situation. Well, you had a lot of little monkeys attached to the one that just occurred. So we try to nip them in the bud, to use a metaphor, and those are triggers. So when you learn, and your clients learn, to recognize emotions in a moment or soon thereafter, you can avoid amygdala hijacking. When your amygdala blows up and you respond, react. Or you can repair it, say, oh, I'm sorry, let me take that back. Let me rephrase that. And you calm down and you communicate in a new way instead of a reactive way, in a responsive way, which alludes to choice. To create personal decompression routines. What can you do to decompress from something that was newly stressful? This being sequestered and quarantined for so long, and I know in India it's hit you all really hard. At least I can get out and walk my dog and play golf by myself and get out in nature, but I can't go see my daughter and grandkids. One of them has type 1 diabetes. It's risky. I can't go to restaurants and do FAC or, cocktail hour with friends. And I know those are minor, but so what's a personal decompression routine? How do you walk in nature and soothe your soul? Do you meditate? Do you listen to music? What helps you change from one mental state to another? So to decompress, almost like in scuba diving, if somebody comes up too fast and they get the bends, they have to get in a decompression chamber. Well, that's metaphorically is kind of what we're trying to do when something has overwhelmed us emotionally. And self-reflection with an honesty check-in called Clear the Decks. Who can you share with what's really going on with you that you just need to share? You don't need it fixed, right? You just need to clear the decks. Oftentimes as helpers, people want to think, oh, I have to fix this problem. No, you don't. And as a coach, you can say, would you like some coaching on that, or do you just want me to hear you? And often that's enough. There's a meditation I do, or a guided imagery I do with clients. I won't have time to do it here, but maybe we can teach it sometime in the future. It's a little 5-7 minute thing called Personal Place of Security. And I have people go to their most favorite place in the world. It could be a beach, or mountains, or rivers, or whatever. And then with all the senses of hearing and sensing and feeling and seeing, make it someplace they can go back to in an instant. So if something comes up, you can in an instant just go to that place mentally. And it's a lot longer than that, but some of you may have that kind of concept already. Okay. So Emerson said, a friend is one before whom I may think out loud. I think that's a lot of what we do in coaching. Coaching is a place where people can think what they've not thought, say what they've not said, and dream out loud in the presence of a committed, trusting listener. Now, you might have friends that can do that too, and maybe your spouse or significant other. If so, give them a big hug and thank them for being that way. Many people don't. And so at least in coaching, we want that environment to be available to people. It is a place where you can be more real with an objective listener who you don't live with or work with. I use the concept of becoming real. I don't know if any of you on here, probably some of you have read The Velveteen Rabbit, a famous English book by Marjorie Williams that I read to my kids when they were young, and then I found out it actually means a lot about living our best life. It's a story about a rabbit who was so well worn that his eyeballs started falling out, his buttons, and his fur was roughed up. And when the kid got all his new mechanical toys for Christmas, the rabbit went in the closet with the old used toys to be sent to the trash heap. The robots, though, weren't warm and cuddly. And when the boy got sick, he wanted his rabbit. And that's when the rabbit became real. His coach, the the horse, the rocking horse, told him, now you can become real. So metaphorically, it's like this. Most coaches have a life well lived. We're coaches because we've lived a life, we've learned some things, and we want to help other people on the path toward greatness, toward their betterment. But we have to be aware of our rough edges. Now, Carl Rogers said, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. You don't change who you are, but you might change your behaviors, your responses to situations. I think that's a great quote. So how will you create more naked talk in your coaching, in your relationships? Where can you find the time and the place and the right person to ask for more truthful sharing and to get under the surface? And how can you do that without wanting to fix, treat, or get in the way of the learning the client has coming toward them? How can you be a conduit for new learning, new choices, and a new zest for your client or your adult learner? So think about those things after today, during today, and how can you encourage courageous vulnerability? Don't be afraid of emotions. Get some supervision or some reflective coaching on, what do I do when my client cries? Or how do I normalize this? Or how do I be more empathetic? I know Ram talks a lot about with Carl Rogers' theory, empathy is at the heart. Unconditional positive regard and empathic listening, right? So courageous vulnerability helps the client have a place to be vulnerable. And you, the coach, also need to be aware of your vulnerability. What's going on in your life that you might need to share with somebody, and maybe share just enough with your client that you might say, well, I can't say I know how you feel, but I lost my wife 3 years ago too, and I know how impactful that was. Maybe that's all you need to share. Not the whole story, just the fact that you have a human experience that's similar. In humanistic psychology and how I was trained, and what's showing up now a lot in coaching, is to bring the persona, or not the persona, but the person of the coach, to bring the coach into the conversation, to actually be that, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me, but to be yourself enough that you don't seem like just a object that's listening, or a robot, but a real person. Oh yeah, it's just self. Bring yourself to coaching. We all hide stuff. Research shows that attempting to minimize or ignores amplifies them, as I said earlier. We all have things happen to us. Life happens. And energy drainers, which is a concept we use a lot in coaching with clients, like what's on your list of energy drainers that keep you from being as vital as you want to? They can be big or small. It could be that pile of laundry you keep wanting to take to the cleaners, or the car that needs to be fixed, or that hard conversation you need to have with your significant other or in-law. But if they're persistent, they need some different strategy. And we wear masks sometimes, but do we know we're wearing one? You're really not being inauthentic if you know you're wearing a mask. If you have to go to the corporate Christmas party and you know what's going to happen with the guy that gets drunk every year, or the great, just know that you're wearing a mask, and it's like you're standing outside yourself, watching yourself at this event. But if you don't know you're wearing it, then you're living falsely. Your shadow, don't leave home without it. There's a lot in my program and in my writings about the shadow. It's not all bad. There's a lot of things in the shadow that just need to have the light shined on them. It can be desires and inspirations and intentions, and they've just never been shared with somebody about, I always wanted to dance, or I always wanted to write this book, or I always wanted to do this instead of that, but I haven't pursued that. So if the light shined on it in coaching and the emotions that come with it, there's some great transformation that can take place. The shadow doesn't hold only these super dark things under lock and key. And you might even be able to help with making some of those have less affective energy. So be, do, have. This is a pyramid I use, or a triangle I use a lot. Most coaches in the beginning, most clients will come, they want to have something different. They want to do something different. or they want to have less of something or do less of something. But eventually we get to the being of the client, and the being of the coach also needs to come out. That's called the ontological methodology. And now in today's ICF competencies, the being of the coach is super important. So keep that in mind as we want to eventually get away from the horizontal line at the bottom and get to the being of that. So going deeper in coaching, transforming clients' lives with transformational coaching, we hold the mirror to ourselves. Are we being really present with our clients? Is there something that we need to talk about in supervision or with a mentor coach or self-reflective practice? And just say, how can I become present? I used the analogy a while ago. My wife actually did die almost 3 years ago, surprisingly and quickly. And I took a month off from coaching, but some of the clients and students I train and mentor heard about it. And it actually helped me to get back into coaching and back into mentoring. But I also had to share enough that I wasn't ignoring the big change in my life. And it turned out to be a good reflective conversation for other students who had had losses in their life. And we didn't have to get into the depth conversation, but it normalized the human of unchosen change versus chosen change. If you choose to move to a new place or you choose to start a new career, that's chosen change. But if somebody dies or you get an illness or you lose a job, that's unchosen change. Eventually, it all has to be chosen. Eventually, you have to accept it, even though you wouldn't have wanted it. So Pennebaker is somebody, I'll go into this kind of quickly. We want to save time. There's a man named Pennebaker who did research on expressing meaningfully. And he found out that people who were severely depressed, who engage in expressive writing, feel happier and less negative than before the writing. And then they report the reports of their symptoms, rumination, and general anxiety tend to drop weeks and months after writing about emotional upheavals. The group who didn't write continue to have a higher degree of depressive symptoms and anxiety. So imagine you might assign your clients to keep a journal, but even if not, if you share that verbally with a trusted listener, it might even be more healing. And the research is starting to show that that's true. So the wisdom of the body, I want to get into this because I know some of you know about this, but this is really a place I focus these days. When you're emotionally challenged, overwhelmed, embarrassed, depleted, in fact, I use the word depleted more than depressed because 90% of the time that fits better. Are you depleted or depressed? That's a question to think about from time to time. What would gain that energy back? Or maybe they're confused or at a loss. What happens? We go to our heads. We think. We come up with ideas. We ruminate. And even in coaching, we might help come up with new thoughts and new strategies. But today's research talks about the wisdom of the gut. And when I say research, I mean neuroscience. That there are neurocells in our gut. And the sense of intuition, the sense of when you say, I have this gut feeling, well, you can often trust that because you do have neurocells connected to your brain in the gut. But the more recent research, the wisdom of the heart, with the concept of the Heart Math Institute, the work of Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza, many other people, the research is showing that in the heart, there are 40,000 neurites, that there are more communication between the heart and the brain than there are between the brain and the heart. So we're going to try something here right at this moment, and then I'd love people to respond in the chat. Imagine a challenge that you're up to right now, something that's really bothering you, or what Fritz Perls would call unfinished business, something you're ruminating about, a challenge that's facing you. Think about it, and think about how is it affecting you, and what are you thinking of doing, and what are the thoughts that you're having that you should do or want to do, or what's in the way? So just take a few seconds with all the thoughts about this challenge that you're facing. All right, that's probably enough for everybody to have the thoughts because they're usually ready-made. They're right behind our moment. Now I want you to imagine, close your eyes. And if you're in a place where you can stand up, you might even stand up. This is change your posture is a lot of changing emotions. Imagine that challenge now and have your hand touch your head and then go down to your heart. Put 2 fingers on your heart and ask your heart, what does it say about this challenge? What statement would your heart tell you about this challenge? The first thing that comes to your heart, not the first thing that comes to your mind. What are the words? What's the message that you get from your heart? And I would love to hear people in the chat share about that. So take some time now to do that if you can. Yeah, I see signs like just go for it. Don't be scared. Start with confidence. Trust yourself. My heart says you're meant to do this. Enjoy the moment. Do the best. Give all. Okay, so here's the point, and you can continue to read those. Every one of those are short, punctuated statements. Your heart message is not going to be long and loquacious and with erudite language. It's going to be to the point, like get over it, get going, trust yourself. So look at all those statements, and almost every one of them is a real quick, brief statement. The heart doesn't have to deal with logic. The message from the heart is quick and to the point, and it can often lead to a great transformation. So I hope you enjoy taking that with you. I teach another class on the magic of metaphors in coaching, and facetiously I call it Metaphors Be With You, or the Star Wars May the Force Be With You joke. But if you listen for metaphors in clients, they'll give it to you most of the time. Like say, oh, I'm just really feeling stuck, or I'm really feeling like I'm just out of control in this river raft and I fell out. I mean, they'll give you something. That's direct. Or you can ask for it. Or you can listen to them and say, you know, I keep getting this image of you being stuck in a snowdrift and you're calling for help and don't know what to do. Or whatever comes to mind. And your client will say, oh, that's it exactly. Or they might say, no, it's more like this. The key that metaphors play is that they bypass emotional language, not for the sake of ignoring the emotions, but you get to the story quicker and you get to the change quicker. If you can change the metaphor and change the outcome of feeling stuck, you don't have to go into all the language of how one might be feeling. I'm not saying to ignore feelings, but metaphors are a vessel. Metaphors, the word actually comes from amphora, which was a vessel back in the early ages of carrying prized jewels and treasures. So, sorry about my dog. So that emotion is carried in that amphora or metaphor. Now, I put this in, and we're coming to the end of what I want to share with you, but Bronnie Ware in Australia wrote a blog a few years ago called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And of course, it was wisdom from the dying for the living. Look at these statements. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Nobody lay on their deathbed saying, I wish I worked harder. But I highlight the third one. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. The point of these is why not do it while you're alive, not while you're on your deathbed? I wish I'd had stayed in touch with my friends. And lastly, I wish that I had let myself be happier. Hang on, I'm gonna have to shut the door. Go away. Sorry about that. We have somebody coming to spread the yard and I have to keep my dog in the house. Okay, so I wish I'd let myself be happier. Now, there's a template that I give people in my training, and sometimes the takeaway is a 6-step. Hang on. Hey! No. I'm sorry about that. That'll be bad.
No worries, Dr. Pat. The Coacharya crowd is very animal friendly, so not
good.
a problem.
Well, I sometimes get coaching from my dog, so I'll just listen to him. So a 6-step process, if you think of a situation that happened in your life, something that wounded you or something that's still stuck with you, recall it. Recall the event, recall the time of your life. Reflect on it. Who was there? What happened? What are your memories of that event? And then reveal it to self. Write about it, like Pennebecker said. Write it down. Reveal it to you, like you're composing the story. Remember it. But here's the key to when you can get naked emotionally. Reveal it to another. Who do you know that you can share this with just for them to listen to? Even if you say, hey, I got this assignment from Dr. Pat. But if you can say, I have something I need to share and I'd like you just to listen to it. And after you've done that, and you may not need any coaching or challenge, you might come up with strategies, but then you get to reboot your life like a computer. You reboot the energy and then restart your life. So then that memory becomes just a memory. It doesn't become like an event that you're still living with. It doesn't have the same energy. So what if, both in your organization and with your clients or wherever you work, what if you taught people that said, when I say, hi, how are you? I really want to know the answer. Most of us say, hi, how are you? Oh, fine. Keep on walking. There's an article I wrote for Forbes magazine, Forbes Coaching Council, that the new CEO of Goldman Sachs wanted his managers to be more transparent. And he wanted them to teach that if people came to work and you said, how are you? You wanted to really know. Not the depth of the story, but just enough. So the person may say, hi, how are you today? Oh, glad you asked. Got a sleepless night. I found out my 16-year-old daughter told me she's pregnant. Oh my God. Well, if there's anything I can do to support you, let me know. You don't have to go into the whole story. You just need to have that human to human connection that I get it. And that the person shared enough where they might feel that they don't have to put on their mask all day. It's something that's bothering them, but you don't have to fix the problem. You just need to be authentic in your hearing and allowing it to be there. Can we create a culture of compassionate and caring curiosity in our schools? Now, I mean training schools, but actually everywhere. You can look at my new online course, Conscious Living Mastery, at that www.consciouslivingmastery.com. That's my website. And now I leave time for questions. Good, we have time left.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to unmute themselves or make comments in chat.
If there's anybody who wants to really come to the panel, we can do that. Otherwise, we can present their views from the chat. But Pat, before that, I just wanted to say it was truly amazing. Many people have said the same thing on the chat box. I mean, some of those things I started noting down, but I said, look, there are far too many to note down. The emotion as energy in motion and balances, you said something, but I interpreted that as balance as being
momentary,
but balance for me to be being in motion. It's like the whirl of the dervish, for example. The most beautiful example of, because I used to practice it at one time as a meditation, and it's extraordinarily powerful. So it's truly amazing. And what we would like to do is to, of course, get your program, online program, as part of a Coacharya offering as well as one of these days. And what comes to my mind is you and I should run a program at Esalen if it's possible. We should try and do that, because your reference to Fritz Perls and various other people.
Well, you know, it's funny. I went to Esalen back when I was 19 and saw Virginia Satir and some of those people. And then I went when I was 55 or something. I'm 70 now. And I remember they said, you all remember back in the 60s when you came here and everybody was running around naked and getting in the hot tubs? And yeah. And I said, well, we don't want you to do that now. You don't look the same.
Yeah, but they still do. I
know. Yeah, I know.
But it's an amazing place. Let me see if there are any questions here. I don't see any questions. But a couple of things that you, thank you, that was fantastic. Could you give some examples of how you got naked with your client during sessions?
Yeah, I think you sense, I coach mostly by phone, to tell you the truth. I only use Zoom for teaching and for groups. I can pick up on a client's shift in their voice or their breathing or their energy. And I think the simplest way is to say some evocative question that's quick, like, what else about that? And just shut up. Just let the silence cause the client to simmer. It's like a cooking metaphor. It's simmering. And then, of course, metaphors is a way for them to really reveal. But I might share a story about, I'm hearing a sense in your voice about fear, or am I right about that? What is a feeling word you have? And if I'm wrong, then they'll correct me and we can go from there. Don't tell them what to think, and don't try to assuage the emotions, but instead say, tell me more what's going on. In fact, I'll use where in your body do you feel that? Not just the heart, but where in your body do you feel that? I actually hate the question, how do you feel? I like to ask my client, how are you experiencing that? Because it's much broader.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Patrick,
Yeah, Vanessa.
I have a couple of quick questions here. What has been your most often used questions to get a client to be naked?
I truly think it's the what else, or what are you experiencing right now under the surface, something like that I give them permission to like pull back the curtain, It varies, but you have to, you don't want to take the surface. You don't want to take the superficial comment. There's always more. So not the transactional, like, oh, you want this, we can do that. Now you can do this. It's like, what's behind that? Who do you need to be for this to occur, maybe? Or what's standing in your way? Anything that gets beneath the surface. And then listen for the nuance of energy.
Mm-hmm.
We've
got another one from Paris too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off. There was a question regarding sharing some of the ways that you facilitate metaphors with clients.
Say that again.
If you could share some ways on how to facilitate metaphors with clients.
Well, you just play with it. If you hear the client hand you a metaphor, like, I'm just feeling stuck, and I'm trained in a technique called clean language, you just say, tell me more about stuck, or tell me more about dizzy, or tell me more about lost. Whatever they come up with, those are metaphors, right? And you say, what kind of lost is that? How, describe it to me. I had a client yesterday who said, I want to get the ball rolling. And so when I was coaching her as a demonstration, I said, well, tell me about the ball. What size is the ball? And how is it rolling? What would happen if it rolled faster? What would happen if, what does that mean, get the ball rolling? And she loved that, because it wasn't my idea of a ball was like this big ball, get the ball rolling. Hers was like this little ball taking little motion and making slow changes. And so if I had guided her, I might have missed it. Metaphors are usually handed to you, but you can also do guided imagery with clients, or you can share a metaphor that comes to mind for you.
Yeah. Pat, I just have a comment to make, and after that, there's a question here. See, one of the things that happens is someone like you, with the amount of experience that you have, many of these things come from as you deeply listen and what the client is saying. And based on that context, you ask a question. My only warning to people who are focusing on what questions would you ask is, for heaven's sake, don't. Because there are no such things as powerful questions. It all depends on the context. It depends on the client. It depends on what is happening at the moment. Coaching is supposed to be about the not knowing. It's not about mugging up a few questions and saying, hey, just because Pat told us that this is a powerful question, we are going to ask this question. Please, for heaven's sake, I think this is one of the first things that we teach people. The whole thing about powerful questions is a myth. And fortunately, ICF has taken away that competency called powerful questioning. I think it's really very, very important. So somebody asked about what are the 3 tips that you would give a coach starting to coach?
Oh, just 3 tips for starting to coach?
Yeah, as a learner.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Make sure you have learned how to really listen and not listen with your response ready to come. Make sure you're ready to listen to the moment, which implies presence. So great listening, focused listening. I don't call it active listening. I call it focused listening. Focused on the client, their words, their energy, what's not being said. Presence of you. You have to get ready for a coaching session. You have to be ready to be of service. Coaching is a service industry. We're going to receive what the client is giving us. And we don't have to be the expert and the all-knowing person. And thirdly, I think what comes to mind is enjoy the moment, because like you talk about questions, when I mentor students, I sometimes send them this cheat sheet of 357 coaching questions, but I say, do not have that readily available when you're coaching somebody. This is for you to study the driver's manual of the Maserati while you're not coaching. Coaching questions need to be made up in the moment from the context of the conversation. And you'll know, even if you just say, so what would that be like? Or how would you like it to be different? Or what else about that? Questions need to be quick and not full of big words. So I may have said more than 3, but that's my summary.
Yeah, I would just add one more, Pat. That is, very often people forget, especially when they are learning early stages of coaching, so impressed by competencies and markers, they forget to be human.
Yes.
All that you need to be is human. How would you work with another person? You mentioned Carl Rogers with that unconditional positive regard and the curious compassion that you talked about. Once you have that radiating out of you, everything else happens. And somebody asked, what should I do to convert fear into happiness? You don't have to do anything. And that would lead you into an exploration about what is causing fear in the client and how it can morph into something better, whatever the client chooses to make it happen.
Right.
So it's not for us to do anything as a coach to be able to do that. I think these are some of the powerful parts which, and I'm sure if they attend a full program with you, people will learn to understand. Once again, we are almost at the close of this, Pat. If you just want to say one thing, we'll finish with that. But I think it has been an amazing session. It's one of the most fascinating sessions I have been in. Thank you.
Well, I love doing this, and I just hope people will explore. You know, what I say is not meant to be some esoteric wisdom from the ages. It's from my ages. I'm a wise elder now. I'm 70 years old and 30 years as a coach. But I may be a masterful coach. I'm not always masterful. So I think that's what people need to know. And I'm striving to be my best. If I say something to a client or think the session wasn't good, I will fix it. I will say, you know, I don't think I was as present as I wanted to be. And so be honest, be naked emotionally, authentically, and learn. Our clients teach us as much as we're teaching them, I think. So.
And be human.
Yes, be human.
Okay, so let me just end with a password. Today, Nishmita has put out the password out there. It's wallet, WALLET. And so those of you, she has given the link to go to and then apply for your CCU as well. And once again, thanks all of you for being there. We had an amazing audience with really some fantastic questions. And we would be having Pat with us as a trainer, that's for one thing. But certainly after hearing him, I'm truly inspired to have him run his conscious living program as part of some of the Coacharya offerings. We will do that
Great.
soon. Thank you very much indeed, Pat.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pat. Bye, everybody.
See you all soon.